started with a rumble, then a roar, and before anyone could react, a wall of mud and fury tore through a quiet riverside town in southern China. What you're seeing now is not a scene from a disaster movie. This is real, raw, and happening right now. The muddy torrent, fierce and relentless, surged down from the hills like a monster unleashed. In just seconds, the riverbanks vanished. One small house, once standing peacefully near the water's edge, was torn apart right before our eyes. The awning, the small storage sheds, everything swallowed whole, gone. And then came the deafening sound. A massive concrete dam, overwhelmed by the sheer force of nature, gave way. Water poured over the edge like a broken faucet turned full blast, feeding an unstoppable river of destruction. The devastation only spread from there. Whole neighborhoods submerged. Streets turned to rivers of thick, swirling sludge, rooftops barely visible. People stranded on balconies, clinging to what little remained of their homes, watching the water rise inch by terrifying inch. But amid this chaos, a single, haunting image. A mother, waist deep in floodwater, gently pushes her baby across the street in a red plastic wash basin, floating like a toy boat on a sea of mud. That image, simple, heartbreaking, speaks louder than words. You can't help but ask yourself, what would I do in her place? In a moment like that, if your home was flooding and all you had was a plastic tub, what's the first thing you'd try to save? Would you stay calm? Would you panic? Let us know in the comments, because these stories are not just statistics. They could be any of us. As the hours passed, the water showed no mercy. From one town to the next, it surged forward, swallowing everything in its path. Playgrounds, markets, schools. The map of southern China was being redrawn by nature in real time. In these small towns, the roads were no longer roads. They were brown, churning rivers. Cars floated like paper boats. People stood helplessly, trapped inside upper-floor windows, watching as the first floor disappeared under a thick wave of mud and debris. But the human spirit refuses to be drowned. A rope tossed across the current, tight, trembling, and on the other end, a man clings for his life. A neighbor grips the line, pulling with every ounce of strength. Beside them, a crane swings overhead, slowly lifting a woman to safety from a rooftop, her hands shaking, but her face calm. And just when you think you've seen it all, comes a moment so absurd, so surreal, it makes you stop in your tracks. There, knee-deep in floodwater, a woman cooking dinner. Her kitchen is flooded, but her pot is boiling. The world around her may be upside down, but dinner must go on. That's the duality of disaster. On one side, destruction. On the other, resilience, routine, even humor. Another shot. A man casually casting a fishing net into a flooded street and catching fish. Real ones. Right there in front of his house. And then, in a completely submerged outdoor food stall, a group of friends still eating. Plastic stools half underwater, bowls floating by. And yet, laughter fills the air. This isn't denial. It's defiance. It's survival in its most human form. Have you ever faced a moment so strange, so out of place in a crisis, that you just had to laugh? Tell us. What's the most surreal thing you've seen or experienced during a disaster? Your story might help someone feel a little less alone. When the waters finally slowed, they didn't recede. They left behind something far more haunting. Imagine this. A parking lot turned graveyard. Cars, twisted, flipped, caked in brown sludge, stacked like discarded toys. Windshields shattered, doors ripped open, personal belongings scattered across the mud like forgotten memories. In one frame, a blue city bus, crushed and half buried, windows blown out. It once carried students, workers, families. Now it's barely recognizable. Even the mightiest didn't stand a chance. Massive freight trucks, some weighing tons, were tossed, flipped, crumpled like foil. One laid on its side, tires spinning in the air as if trying to run from the water too late. And homes that took a lifetime to build, gone in seconds. A 2-story house, dragged by the flood like a raft, collapsed midstream as cameras rolled. Walls cracked, then folded like paper. The sound, a deep, terrifying crunch, echoed through the valley. Bridges, once symbols of connection, now symbols of fragility. A suspension bridge, once swaying gently with the wind, now swallowed beneath a roaring current. Steel beams buckled, concrete foundations carved out like soft sand. Nature didn't just test these structures, it broke them. You don't realize how much we take for granted until you see a highway become a river, a neighborhood become a lake, until the familiar becomes unrecognizable. What would you miss the most if your home were gone tomorrow? Not just the house, but the small things, the smell of your kitchen, your favorite chair, that creaky floorboard in the hallway. Share it below. It's often the little things that hold the biggest pieces of our lives. And then, when the skies cleared, silence. But it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of loss and of resilience. Footage now shows people shoveling through knee-high mud. With bare hands and broken tools, they begin to reclaim what little they can. Clothes hung out to dry on damaged fences. Families digging through the wreckage of what once was a home, searching not just for valuables, but for pieces of memory. A photo, a toy, a nameplate from the front door. In one clip, emergency workers form a human chain, handing supplies, lifting elderly residents into boats, cradling children in their arms. Faces, exhausted, but determined. No uniforms needed to tell you who the heroes are. And yes, life goes on. A woman in a flooded kitchen stirs her pot with quiet grace. A group of neighbors, ankle-deep in water, share a hot meal on plastic stools. And then, just when you think you've seen it all, a wedding. Yes, a wedding. 2 people, standing in the rain, under a simple white sheet, their feet soaked, their smiles radiant. No grand ballroom, no fancy decor, just love, and the stubborn belief that joy still has a place in a broken world. This flood wasn't just water, it was a test. Of bridges, yes. Of homes and roads, yes. But most of all, of spirit. And the people of southern China? They didn't just survive, they stood back up. This wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a mirror, showing us how fragile we are and how strong we can be. So, how do you see it? Are we prepared, really prepared, for the new extremes of nature? Or are we building our cities on borrowed time? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters, and so does your experience. From heartbreak to hope, from destruction to determination. This was not just a flood. This was a story of humanity. I'm James, and this is a story we all need to remember.